The next session and the final session, the final panel for this session is going to be looking at technology trends. And yeah, no, I've got it. Yeah, thanks. It's going to be, there we go. Fantastic lineup of speakers that are going to be exploring technology trends in the biotech space and giving us an insight into what exciting technologies we can look forward to in 2025. So huge welcome to all the speakers, and I'm going to hand it over to Femida Gwadry-Sridhar to moderate the session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You want to sit in here?
Why not?
Okay.
You can sit over there if you want.
You can sit up over there, wherever you want. I just called you forward. Good afternoon. So just a quick introduction for myself. My name is Femida Gwadry-Sridhar. I'm the founder and CEO of a healthcare technology platform company called Pulse Infoframe. We're a company that have built a platform primarily for real-world evidence and evidence generation globally in cancer and rare disease and certain complex chronic diseases. Our head office is in Canada. I'm actually born in the United Kingdom. Our US hub is in Boston, but we do work globally. I also sit on a publicly traded mid-sized CRO on NASDAQ known as MedPace. I'm really very honored to have Tony ask me to moderate this panel. And I'm quite excited because it's a panel that actually is very interesting in terms of the experience that they bring and also their background, which is not something that I'm very familiar with. And I've had the opportunity to speak with them prior, but also to learn a little bit more about their interests and how it intersects between what we've been talking about so far, which does include technology, science, innovation, investment, and the tide that is changing around us. So I'd like to start from, I guess, this side. Are we in order of the names here? I think we are. So Mike, you're on this side. If you could kindly introduce yourself, that would be terrific. Thank you.
I'm Mike Ward. I'm the Global Head of Thought Leadership at Clarivate, which is a data analytics solutions company. I've been a journalist covering the life sciences sector for more than 40 years.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Urquhart. I'm currently a freelance journalist. I previously edited Evaluate Vantage, and I thought I'd been in the industry quite a while, but compared to Mike, I'm just basically a baby. So I've only been covering the industry for a mere 20-something years. So there you go.
Hi, I'm Megan Thomas. I'm the multimedia editor at DDW. And speaking of babies, I started I think I started during the pandemic, and Genesis was actually my first in-person event with DDW. So it's funny to be facing this direction not that long afterwards. And so I'm excited to learn from the rest of the panel, but also kind of showcase the early stage, not just of drug discovery, but of my career within it.
Great. Thank you. Victoria.
Right. My name is Victoria English. I'm co-founder and currently director of Evernow Publishing, which publishes a 10 times a year journal called MedNous. My late husband and I co-founded this publication in 2007. We're both financial journalists, and we decided to plunge in at the time of the financial crisis, 2007. And also at a time when I had been, at the time that we founded this company, I was the editor of Regulatory Affairs Journal, which is a Informa publication. And I'd had a long conversation with the head of the European Medicines Agency, who was in a mild panic because there weren't any products to review for the coming year. And so here we were, crisis point. We decided to launch MedNous, financial crisis, no products, innovation, dead. And we were going to find out how to get this going.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Melton. I work for Nature Biotechnology. This is a science journal, and we publish academic research. But what I do as the news editor is my sweet spot is that I take all that science that is going from academia in translation into startups, all that innovation that will become hopefully a product, a therapeutic, a platform. So that's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. So we also have a baby Lisa and another Lisa. So every panel has managed to choose people with the same names. So
I feel like a Spice Girl.
yeah, who do you want to be? Pick your name. All right. So we know that there's a pace of change here, right? We're here to watch the space. So each of our panelists have given us a little bit of a description and introduction of who they are. And what we've seen is that there are significant market changes, geopolitical considerations, and a shift actually in the awareness, I would say, of a lot of epidemiological changes also in our global healthcare ecosystem. When you look at lifestyle changes, when you hear, Ellen talk about rare diseases, there's increasing awareness of all of these new areas of importance and interest to us. We know that some of you are going to be talking about drugs and which drugs come to market and why they come to market and what do we, think about when we're covering some of those sort of innovations. So I'm actually going to ask, Lisa to start. Now, which Lisa? Yes, Lisa Urquhart. I'm joking.
Sure.
Lisa, tell us a little bit about, you've just, and I want each of you in your own words to tell us a little bit about how you see these changes and these shifts affecting how we should be looking at either the financial markets, looking at innovation. You're looking at translating knowledge into product, which ultimately we're hoping will be funded. So formulate the question in a way that makes sense to what you do and tell us a little bit about how you would approach it. So Lisa, share.
So you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to go deep into the science here. One of the things that really had me most excited last year and that I'm hoping will come through in the following year, in 2025, is something that I learned at a synthetic biology conference, and it's foundation models. You may have heard of this already, but I hadn't. So foundation models are like ChatGPT-4, that is a LLM, a large language model. Most of these you've heard of, they're based on text mining from the internet. But here there's a clutch of companies and also institutes, very well-funded institutes, that are using the same approach, but to mine DNA, RNA, proteins at the most granular level. But what is different about that? Because you might say, okay, well, everybody's doing this. Everybody's using AI to mine biological data. Well, what's different here is that the data are unlabeled. They're going in blind, and they're expecting these algorithms to mine, to look for patterns, to find where there is convergence. It could be anything. And for me, as a scientist myself, this is most exciting because so far, if you think of academic research and if you think of drug discovery, it's always been following a hypothesis. This is the way science has always been done. You follow a hypothesis, or a drug company is looking at a certain target, at a certain pathway. Here, it's blind. So nobody knows what's going to come out of this. And so there's, for instance, a company called ESM3 that's already found a bio-designed molecule that is the green fluorescent protein with 58% of what nature has made this protein, that it works, but it's also added to it and increased its functionality. So if you think of it from the point of view of a drug company, this is gold. So that's one thing that I think is going to be very exciting to track. I'll stop there.
So yeah, and sorry, that was Lisa Melton, my error.
Sorry.
You
So
were supposed to go first.
just so maybe pulling on that thread, is that like a drug looking for a disease? I mean, is there a risk that when you're using AI, you're looking for something, but the interpretation is a scientific interpretation, and is there potentially a problem with that, or is it all good?
To me,
I'm going to ask you the question first. Yeah.
So this is the point. The point being that so far all of drug discovery has been narrow, and it's been focused, looking from what's already been published. But here, what I'm proposing is that it's a new era where the algorithms are going to be doing the searching, if you like. So who knows what these algorithms are going to come up with? It could change everything, and I'm watching.
Okay. Megan, maybe tell us a little bit about what you're seeing right now. You want to talk about Alzheimer's and some of the drugs that are on the market? Go ahead.
Yes, so I mean, there's, I think, so much of the question of what's exciting at the moment and what's exciting to write about and read about is, ironically, the stuff you didn't see coming and the breakthroughs and the things that maybe a year ago I couldn't have predicted. But I am very curious to see Leqembi reach the finish line globally. The Alzheimer's drug has already got accelerated FDA approval and shows so much promise. It seems like I've been talking about it in articles and in features for ages now. So seeing additional global approvals in 2025 is something that I'm kind of really looking forward to hopefully seeing success in. And also just semaglutide or Ozempic, it really does seem to be a bit of a wonder drug, and it'll be interesting to see whether it can kind of keep that momentum.
So I think today in Endpoints, or one of the journals, there was something that came out about both Novo and Lilly and their weight reduction products. And so what do you think about, yes, you see an immediate benefit in a drug, and then we haven't really thought about all of the side effects and problems that are encountered in sudden and rapid weight loss. And it comes down to the endpoints. If the metric that we're using is you've lost 33% versus 51.6% of your body fat, is that good for your body or bad? How do you think about that?
I think it's an excellent question. I think I've been surprised to see just how many people in my life socially, not necessarily even in the industry, are obsessed with this drug, and not necessarily people who, I don't want to say people that don't need it, but I think that it's been really interesting to see how quickly people have picked it up as something that is amazing for weight loss, and that's all they're willing to think about it at this point. So I think that the knock-on effects will be good to follow. I think that we need to be careful. It does seem super promising. It does seem really exciting, but I think, as with everything, you've got to have a healthy amount of, not necessarily skepticism, but certainly wariness, maybe.
I'm super wary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
So
Mike,
Lisa, tell us. Go ahead.
I think, Mike, you touched on it earlier, didn't you, about the fact about muscle loss.
Yeah.
So when we talk about weight, it is absolute weight. It's not just separate. It's not differentiated between
Exactly.
fat and muscle. So what you're getting is they're losing muscle mass, which means when they stop these drugs, they're getting what's called a metabolic imbalance, which means you have less muscle to burn fat when you stop these drugs, which means you are going to put on even more weight. And also one of the things I was talking to somebody earlier about is we're not tracking the discontinuations on these drugs. These are not easy drugs for everybody. They give you, GLP-1s have always had GI issues attached to them. They make you feel sick. They give you problems at the other end. So, I mean, not everybody wants to stick with them. And so if people are basically quitting these drugs and then putting even more weight on, what are the solutions? I think, Mike, you were talking about, I'm more excited about things, the drugs that are looking at weight loss that maintains muscle mass as well.
So Lisa, just while we're with you, before we come to Mike, what do you want to write about? What are you watching in this space right now?
I'm pivoting completely opposite direction. It kind of sort of keys into what Lisa's saying. Lisa, the other Lisa. I'm not going to call her non-baby Lisa. Anyway, I'm very interested in AI drug discovery. As to, watch this space, I could be waiting and watching for a very long time. But it is quite interesting, and we've seen, I think what we need to separate is what's happening in the technology. I think the technology is finally catching up with some of the aspirations of some of the early companies. So we've got the first generation companies, as I described them, as the Accentures of this world, which we know had to fold into recursion for various reasons, not least because of their CEO's inappropriate behaviour. But also we've got, Benevolent AI that hasn't lived up to its promise. But I think what I'm excited to see in the coming months is the fact that the technology is finally catching up with some of the promise. So the algorithms are getting better. We're seeing more automation in the industry in terms of wet labs. So what people tend to separate is the fact that ultimately you've got an AI algorithm, come up with a target, but at some point that has got to be tested in a wet lab. But what we're seeing now is more automation in the wet labs, which are creating massive amounts of data, which are then fed into the algorithms, and that means you can alter the experiments. So we're getting these what's called, quite a lot of people calling it lab in a loop. So you start with an experiment, it produces data, the data's then fed back into the algorithm, it then comes up with another experiment, and it just keeps going round and round and round. So you get improvements on both the algorithm and the experimentation. I'm also very interested in what's happening in the UK in terms of AI. We've got some amazing companies here. We've got Relation Therapeutics. They got 35 million seed funding round earlier this year from and one of the co-founders of Nvidia, the big chip company. We've also saw Helix the other day from Cambridge. They raised 47 million. It's not an inconsiderable sum. And they've just also signed a collaboration deal with Sanofi to look at rare diseases. I think Isomorphic Labs as well. I think they've just done 2 deals with Eli Lilly and Sanofi that could potentially worth 3 billion. So I'm very excited about the fact that the UK seems to be punching well above its weight in terms of AI.
So if you go to one of the slides that was shown previously, it's the longitudinality of the journey. So if you look at Helix, given that you've raised that, it didn't happen yesterday.
No.
It's been a decade in the making. And so we'll come back to AI in a minute. But Mike, you've spent, I don't want to say how many years, but
Megan wasn't
looking at
alive,
analysis.
basically.
Please, what are you watching for? You've seen it all.
One of the interesting things, for example, I was on a panel not so long ago at a conference, and it was sort of Groundhog Day, because people sort of said, "Oh, the problems that the industry has got." Well, actually, as sort of David Stubbs earlier this morning sort of showed, it's cyclical. So in fact, we've had these sort of nuclear winters. We've had it when nobody cared, when we've had sort of your politicians causing trouble, and sort of I sort of look at it and sort of think, but each time again with that sort of that graph that David showed, it's like, well, hey, you've got 4x return or whatever the number was, and so you just sort of see the progress. So I'm not sort of particularly worried about the sort of changes, because one of the things is that this industry has always been able to adapt to the change. So I remember when there was the first time when sort of politicians were sort of causing problems to the industry. Christoph Wiebecker, who was the CEO of Sanofi at the time, I was asking him, "Oh, so how are you going to deal with?" I think it was Obama, and it was about bringing in potentially drug price controls, and his view was, hey, it is what it is, and if it's raining, you put a raincoat on, or you take out an umbrella, so you just sort of prepare for that. So I'm interested to sort of see how the Trump picks turn out. I'm interested to sort of see how China continues to develop, and will we see that sort of continental shift? Will Europe and the Europeans actually start looking eastwards? Because we certainly know that the sort of Chinese and the South Koreans are actually very keen to do deals here in Europe.
All right, so I'm going to bring this all together now for Victoria. All right, so we've talked about AI, we've talked about investment, we've talked about people putting money in, people not being as ready to put money in, and AI has kind of been like that a little bit, as an example. I think Harvard Business Review this month, actually their hard copy, talks about the use of AI, and they use a number of different case studies. But they also talk about AI as a tool that you need to know how to use. My example is always, it's a fast car that you need to know how to drive, and you can't just apply it. But why is this relevant to Victoria? Because she's looking at the funding environment in Europe and looking at some of the considerations around why Europe is funding in certain ways, or what the markets are in Europe, and how money sometimes flows from the US, which we've also heard earlier. So Victoria, please.
Sure. What I want to say first is in 2007, during the financial crisis, when we founded our publication, there really wasn't any guarantee that there would be a healthy biotech industry in this part of the world. So we've had a lot of success, meaning UK and European Union, so I say we in that context. The venture capital industry has grown, and we have many European venture capital companies that are plundering the US for new assets and also supporting European industries. And we've had in the UK, as mentioned here, some excellent startups and technology developed in the AI field, which is certainly applicable across the industry. But what we haven't had, and this is what I hope to be writing about in 2025, is the liberation of private capital. So what you have in Europe, I'm going to give you a number. It could be a headline for us in 2025. The number is 8 trillion euros. 8 trillion euros, according to the European Central Bank, is the amount of money that is in savings accounts in Europe. And every year, 350 billion of it is deposited or withdrawn for whatever reason. What we're seeing now is a sudden realization by, well, maybe not sudden, but a realization by certainly some of the politicians and very much so the businesses, that unless Europe can galvanize its industry, galvanize the structure of the financing environment, and galvanize and change the regulatory environment, this will not grow. This will be a land of tourists, you know, people who go to take a boat down the Rhine and that's it. But we do have a promise here because our present commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, commissioned a report from Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank. And this report is in the process of being implemented slowly. There's a new commissioner for enterprise, and the head of the central bank, the European Central Bank, has set up an agenda. And she says, okay, first thing we need to do is to upgrade the regulator, the financial regulator in Europe, to make it more like the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then there's a discussion about, and this is an ongoing discussion, I follow it every day, there's a discussion about, well, if we can't get every one of the 27 member states to sign up to a common trading venue for shares instead of having 35 separate exchanges with 35 separate regulations, then we get just 10 countries or 5 countries, you know, only those countries that are willing and able, and then see if everybody else comes on board. So this is very much the strategy that was employed 40 years ago in trying to get the European currency off the ground. And it's the strategy that's being used now, and it would have beneficial effects if it happens. If there's a common tape, that's all we need initially. This would have great implications for the UK because you could have arbitrage opportunities, you could have, and if you have a common regulatory structure with a common language, investors, retail investors in the United States, maybe they would come over and invest, or invest both in NASDAQ and in Europe. And so what you're looking for, what you're hoping for, is a new global platform for building capital, raising capital, and deploying capital in this industry. Now, it would, of course, apply to other industries as well. But in particular, this is the industry that we're writing about. So I'm hoping to see that 8 trillion figure in our publication in 2025.
We know that time to change, especially in a regulated market like finance, is going to be a long road. So what do people do in between, right? We've heard Lisa's excitement about all of the new therapeutics. We've heard a lot about what's going on at universities. We've heard, you know, Lisa Melton talk about AI. How do these companies now start to think about financing their growth? Because we've also, I think you and I spoke a little bit about the Italian pharmaceutical industry. Many of the companies in Italy are family owned. They don't trade in the public markets. They're privately held, most of them. They set up their own funds. And so what I'm getting at is there is a mindset already and a lot of sort of historical information and behavior that needs to be changed. If you look at European banks and even the way that people deposit in banks and the risk aversion that many people have dealing with banks in this continent in particular, how are we going to change that?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen
tomorrow.
If we say, how do we change it? I think it will change because of the crises that are upon us. And so the first crisis is defense spending. And there has to be an upgrade in the European contribution to NATO. And that money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to have to come from building the private market. And on the back of that, you'll begin to see people championing innovation and say, well, hold on, if we can raise 10 billion for the defense industry, why can't we raise 30 billion for the biotech industry? You know, it is basically what it is countries, forgive me if anybody here is from Luxembourg, it's countries like Luxembourg, which are basically traditional tax havens, that are slowing this down. And that's why people like Macron have said it doesn't really matter if everyone is on board. We just have to have enough people on board to get the liquidity going. And once we have liquidity, once we have a common regulation, well, we have a common, you don't think it's going to happen?
Mike is going to provide a commentary
Yeah.
when you're done.
Yeah, you don't think it's going to happen? Well, you know, what can I say? So I hope I've
Okay.
answered your question.
Well, Mike, provide your
So
view.
you have a producer contrarian view. Well, okay. Already there is a global market for biotech. It's called NASDAQ.
Yeah.
Okay, and it works pretty efficiently. And you know, as was explained, you don't even have to basically these days be in the States
Absolutely not.
to be there. And we've seen companies be very successful. It is a place that has got deep pools of capital now, and that's what's important. Europe has tried before and failed before. So it's about 1998, 1997, ESDAC was established, and that the idea there was get retail investors because they'd seen sort of what day traders were doing in the States. It didn't take off. It didn't happen. And then when you then sort of talking about sort of the various countries, sort of saying, oh well, just get 5 of them together. So you get Spain, you get France, you get Italy, you get Germany, and say the Netherlands. You can't see. I mean, for a start, they'll all want to be. Oh, we want to be the home of the regulator. So that's the first 5 years of the row. I just think there is a market. It's working. It's not broken. We don't need to fix it.
Yeah, but you can have arbitrage between the two, and you can have
Well,
you can have more liquidity on this side of the.
No, but there is arbitrage.
Correct.
But it's a scientific arbitrage. So what happens is you've got American investors who sort of look and sort of see, actually, I can pick up these assets, and it's a lot less costly, and also we can actually hire talent at a fraction of the cost.
However, what you're seeing, and this is why the Europeans are dead set on doing this, is you're seeing a migration. Once the assets have been funded and once they get to a commercialization stage, whoop off to the US. And this is the big problem for this country as well, that you don't have these companies staying.
I think the other big
Yeah.
problem we have in this country is you're talking about pension funds. I mean, I don't know anybody here that wants to put their pension into biotech. And you might be I don't know what you'll be eating in about 20 years' time. But so I think one of the big problems we've had is with it, and it is almost like a chicken and egg, isn't it? The fact that we need success stories to build investment. And I don't know, I think Mike, we've been talking about this for 40 years. Well, you might be 40 years, me 20 years, and whatever. So it's a kind of circular argument, and I don't know where it stops. I'm not entirely sure if maybe some of the ideas of investing in the UK, the pension funds, it might work. But I think this, again, it's a long-term play. It's a 10-year play plus. So it will work. It might work, but
hold on.
it's long. It's a long old play.
Okay, one comment from you, and then I want to go to Megan.
So
Please.
again, I mean, I understand why politicians, etc., they want to grow the economy. It kind of makes them look good, etc. But one of the things that keeps cropping up all day in the theme is actually, and the last speaker, right? So Ellen sort of said she wasn't in it for the money, right? She actually wanted to make a difference. And I think that, you know, when it comes to, okay, so we're not able to sort of grow these companies or whatever, but if you look at, say, for example, many of the most important drugs that have made a difference to people, they were discovered and developed, initially developed here in Europe. They then obviously have been sort of like commercialized in the States. But nevertheless, if what you're wanting to drive is new medicines to help people, then we're doing the right thing.
So, no,
You're basically losing the industry, is what you're doing.
well, I mean,
Well,
there are.
We're not losing. What
Okay.
we're doing is we're maybe
All
not
right, hold
maturing
on.
the
I'm
industry.
gonna-
We're not
I'm gonna
losing
take
it. We're still great on
moderators'
innovation, but we're
prero-
not very great on
Lisa,
commercialization.
Moderator's prerogative for a second here. Otherwise, we could. Otherwise, everybody's going to leave on a break, and we're going to be here talking to ourselves, right? In our 4 minutes that we have left.
It's I talk to myself all the time.
It's all right. Yeah, but now you're doing it. Now you're doing it in public. Right?
I think they still have a question in the
No,
back.
I'm-
Will they disappear?
Just hold on. I'm not
Okay.
done. All right, thank
Sorry.
you. I'm moderating today. You
Okay,
can do
fine.
it next time.
Okay, fine.
All right. So I have a couple of. I'm listening to you. We're talking about success. We're talking about drugs that are coming to market. Megan, you talked about a couple of failures. You know, things that have failed, and you're looking for success. What is driving that failure? Because not everything is rosy. Drugs do fail. There's such a rush to come to market that maybe we're missing a few steps in between. What are your views?
Goodness, I feel like I'm slowing down the conversation that's just been going on to
okay.
discuss this. But
There are drinks afterwards later, right?
But yeah, I think there's certain challenges that are slowing things down. There's supply chain resilience, there's complexity in regulations, there's integration or the lack of proper integration of certain technological platforms that have the potential to revolutionize what's going on, but aren't necessarily being adopted properly or are not doing so with the groundwork being done properly and efficiently first. So I think that, sorry, I'm just trying to phrase what I mean. I think that there's so much potential in so many different areas, and I think that all of these different pieces need to kind of work at the same time. There needs to be a market awareness, there needs to be regulatory awareness, and hopefully the next year we'll see something settle a bit, although every event like this that I've come to annually, there's been something new that's been the disruptor. So I suppose perhaps there's never one solution.
Okay, you've made an important point, and that is really that, you know, when you look at some of the failures, you kind of need to know the disease you're working in before you set out to use whatever tool you're going to use. And I say that seriously because if you look at CRISPR, if you look at gene editing, if you look at gene therapy, if you don't understand the natural history of the disease and you target something in a place where you don't know where it's going to work, then you're going to get output, but you don't necessarily know what it means. You also end up mishitting, particularly in diseases that go up in time, up and down over time. So, do I have time for questions, or do you want me to ask each of them to provide you one? In rapid fire? Okay, rapid fire starting. Well, I mean, the thing is, all right, has this panel changed your view? How about we do that? And what do you want to leave the audience with in a couple of sentences? We'll start with you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Femida. I'm upbeat, particularly about the UK. Things like the Human Cell Atlas, the Human Tumor Atlas. These are single cell spatial omics. They're an incredible treasure trove for pharma companies, for biotech companies. I think the UK is really making a huge effort here and providing the right basics for drug discovery to prosper.
Thank you, Victoria.
Right, I totally agree. Single cell analysis, excellent. And you can bring in the AI, as you've mentioned before. The only other thing I'd like to say is, having been in this business for as long as Mike has, or longer, but not in life science, we have a euro. How many years did it take to do that? There's going to be a European share market, I promise.
Hold that thought. While Mike is talking to himself in his head, do you want to? Go ahead.
Yes, well, I often actually say to people that what I so enjoy about working in the drug discovery, the early phases, is that so much of it is positive. Everything's exciting, everything's new. We stop, generally speaking, reporting stuff at phase 2. So that's when things start going wrong. So I do have an optimist view, perhaps, of what's coming. But I do think that in the lab, there's so many developments that are going to be driven by AI, by precision medicine and innovative therapeutic models. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
Thank you. Lisa.
I'm, again, excited about AI, but I'm also very excited about what's going to happen in the US over the next year, and I have my popcorn ready. And so I'm going to be sitting and watching events from January the 20th onwards.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, so that's all these colleagues are also going rah, 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 the UK. Interestingly, I'll tell you what actually I take from today, which I was very pleased to see, and that was George, who, you know, basically he's a Tory. He was a Tory minister. He's now in the opposition, but how he is sort of, you know, very, very supportive of the push that the British government is pushing at the life sciences. I.e., they get it and he gets it, and I think that by having what is not a bipartisan approach, but actually by having sort of, you know, having a bipartisan approach, I think is actually going to be sort of, you know, helpful for at least nurturing the ecosystem that we've got here.
Excellent point. Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. Really appreciate your contributions today. And I think it's coffee time, right? You want to have a couple of words?